Marfa, Texas. You heard of the Marfa Lights?
No, I have not heard of that.
The Marfa Lights are these anomalous, and that's a state kind of recognized paranormal mystery too, mysterious Marfa Lights. They have a kind of a picnic area where you can watch them at night. No one knows what they are. They appear every night and they bounce around on the horizon. They go up and down and back and forth. People say, oh, they're headlights from different cars on the highway, but the Air Force, the state police, they've all tried to figure out what they are, and they just don't know what the Marfa Lights are.
I grew up in West Texas, just outside of Marfa, where the land is flat enough to make you feel like the sky is sitting on your shoulders. Out there, people don't need much to entertain themselves. A folding chair, a cooler, and a dark road are enough if the night is clear. That's how most tourists first meet the Marfa Lights. They park along the highway after sunset, point their phones toward the empty desert, and wait for something they don't understand to flicker across the horizon. Sometimes the lights appear as little white dots. Sometimes they glow orange or blue. Sometimes they move in straight lines, then vanish before anyone can explain where they went. Scientists have tried to explain them for years. Headlights, gas, reflections, heat rising off the desert. Locals usually just shrug. When you grow up around something strange, you stop calling it strange. It becomes part of the background, like coyotes howling or dust storms rolling over the highway. By the time I was old enough to drive, I had seen the lights more times than I could count, and I believed what everyone else believed. They were harmless. Beautiful, maybe. Unexplainable, sure, but harmless. I don't believe that anymore. My family ran cattle on a piece of land south of Marfa. Not a big operation, just enough acres to keep us busy and enough animals to make vacations impossible. After my father passed, I stayed on to help my mother keep the place from falling apart. Most nights, after feeding and checking fences, I'd drive the long dirt road back to the house with the windows down. There's a kind of silence out there you can't really describe to people who grew up near cities. It isn't peaceful exactly. It's too large to be peaceful. It feels like something is listening. The first time I noticed the lights acting different was in late August. I was coming back from repairing a gate that had been knocked loose by a bull, and I saw 3 lights hovering low over the desert. That wasn't unusual. What caught my attention was how still they were. Normally, the Marfa Lights drift. They blink in and out, split apart, move sideways, disappear behind nothing. These didn't. They stayed in a perfect triangle, all the same distance apart, glowing pale white against the dark land. I stopped the truck and watched them through the windshield. After a few seconds, they moved. Not randomly, together. All 3 dipped at the exact same time, like they were attached to the same invisible string. Then they slid west and vanished behind a low ridge. I sat there longer than I should have, waiting for them to come back. They didn't. The next night, I saw them again. Same place, same triangle, same movement. That was the first time the Marfa Lights made me feel afraid. Not because they were there, because it felt like they knew I was there too. Over the next week, I started watching for them on purpose. I told myself it was curiosity, something to do after work, something to break up the routine. But every night, once the sun dropped behind the mountains, I found myself taking the same road and parking in the same spot. And every night, the lights appeared. At first, there were 3, then 5, then 9. They always hovered in the same place, beyond the last fence line, where our land faded into miles of open desert. I checked old maps in my father's office and newer ones online. There was nothing out there. No road, no buildings, no power lines. Nothing that could explain why lights would gather in the exact same spot every night. On the 10th night, I brought binoculars. Through the glass, the lights didn't look like headlights or flames. They looked round and solid, almost like lanterns hanging in the air. Then, one of them moved closer. I lowered the binoculars, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was still coming. Slowly, Not floating exactly, gliding. It stopped maybe a quarter mile away, just above the brush. My radio crackled. I had been listening to an old country station, but the music cut out and became static. I reached for the dial, and that's when I heard a voice. It was low and broken, buried under the interference. At first I thought it was some kind of broadcast bleeding through. Then it said my name, Caleb. My hand froze over the radio. The voice came again, weaker this time. Caleb, come here. I shut the radio off. The cab went silent. Outside, the single light pulsed once. Then it drifted back toward the others. I drove home fast enough to kick gravel halfway up the side of the truck. For 2 days, I stayed away from that road. I tried to convince myself I had misheard it. Radios do strange things in empty places. Signals bounce. Voices overlap. A person can hear whatever they're scared of hearing if they listen long enough. But on the third night, I went back. I wish I could say I didn't. I wish I could say fear was stronger than curiosity. But fear is not always the thing that keeps people away. Sometimes it's the thing that pulls them closer. That night, I parked in the same spot with the engine off and waited. The lights appeared just after 10:30. This time there were too many to count. They shimmered across the horizon like a row of candles. Some white, some orange, a few faint blue. They weren't scattered anymore. They formed a loose line, stretching from east to west, like a path. My radio turned on by itself, not loud, just enough for the speakers to hiss. I stared at it. Then the static cleared, and I heard my grandfather's voice. He had been dead for 12 years. Boy, he said, that was all. Just one word. But I knew it was him. My grandfather had a gravelly voice from 50 years of cigarettes and dust. When I was little, he never called me Caleb. Always boy. Sometimes with love, sometimes with disappointment, but always the same. Boy. My throat went dry. The lights began moving west. The radio whispered again, follow. I should have gone home. Instead, I started the truck. There are roads in that part of Texas that are only roads because people keep driving over them. 2 tire tracks pressed into sand and rock, winding through mesquite and cactus. I followed one as far as I could, keeping the lights ahead of me. Every time I got close, they moved farther away. Every time I stopped, they stopped too. My headlights bounced over the rough ground, and the truck rattled like it was coming apart piece by piece. After maybe 20 minutes, my GPS lost signal. Then my phone screen went black, even though it had been half charged. The radio stayed on. It played voices now. Not music. Voices. Some I didn't recognize. Some I did. My father coughing. My mother calling me from the porch. An old friend from high school laughing like he used to before the accident that killed him. They didn't speak in full sentences, just fragments. Over here. Not far. Please. Caleb. I gripped the steering wheel until my hands hurt and kept driving. The land started to change. The flat desert dipped without warning, and the truck rolled down into a shallow wash I had never seen before. The air felt colder there. The brush thinned out. Rocks rose on both sides of the path, higher and smoother than they should have been. At the bottom of the wash, my headlights hit something metallic. I slammed the brakes. An old pickup sat half buried in sand. It was rusted so badly that I couldn't tell what color it used to be. One door hung open. The windshield was gone. Its tires had sunk into the earth, like it had been sitting there for decades. The strange part was the direction it faced. West. The same direction as the lights. I got out of my truck. The moment my boots touched the ground, every insect sound stopped. No crickets, no cicadas, no wind. Just the ticking of my engine cooling behind me. I walked to the old pickup and shined my flashlight inside. Empty. No bones. No clothes. No keys in the ignition. On the dashboard, carved into the dust with a finger, were 3 words. They know us. I backed away. That was when I saw the second vehicle, then the third, then the fourth. They were everywhere: cars, trucks, vans, some old enough to have rounded fenders and chrome bumpers, some newer, all abandoned, all facing west, all covered in dust. It looked like a graveyard for people who had driven somewhere they were never meant to reach. The lights were farther ahead now, gathered above a narrow opening between two rock walls, a canyon. I knew every draw, wash, and ridge within 20 miles of our land. That canyon had never been there. I don't mean I had never noticed it. I mean the land itself looked wrong, like someone had folded it open in the night. The entrance was too dark for my headlights to enter. The lights hovered above it patiently, waiting. The radio spoke again. This time it was my father. "Don't make me come get you." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because that was exactly what he used to say when I was a kid and stayed outside too long after dark. But the voice wasn't right. The words were his. The tone wasn't. There was something underneath it. Something wearing his voice like a mask that didn't fit. I should have turned around then. I know that. But I had already followed too far to go home with nothing but fear. So I took my flashlight and walked into the canyon. The temperature dropped with every step. The walls rose higher, blocking the stars until only a thin black strip of sky remained above me. My flashlight beam crawled over stone that looked almost polished, too smooth for any natural canyon. After a while, I noticed markings on the walls. At first, I thought they were scratches. Then I realized they were names. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Some carved deep, some barely visible, some modern, some so old the letters looked strange and uneven. I saw dates from the 1970s, the 1940s, the 1800s, then names with no dates at all. At the end of the canyon, the ground opened into a wide circular basin. That was where the lights were born. They rose from a crack in the center of the earth. Not a hole exactly, a split, long and narrow, running across the stone like a wound. It glowed faintly from below, pulsing with the same white-orange color as the lights above the desert. One by one, the lights drifted out of it, slowly, silently, like bubbles rising from deep water. I stood at the edge of the basin, unable to move. Then I heard whispering from below. Not through the radio this time. From the crack, hundreds of voices overlapping in the dark. They spoke names. Some I knew, most I didn't. Then they all stopped, at the same time. A single voice rose from underneath. My grandfather's. "Look down, boy." I didn't want to, but I did. At first, I only saw darkness. Then the glow brightened, and I saw people. They were standing far below the surface, packed shoulder to shoulder in the blackness beneath the desert. Their faces were turned upward. Their eyes reflected the light like animals caught in headlights. They weren't moving. They weren't blinking. Some wore cowboy hats and work shirts. Some wore dresses from another time. Some looked like tourists. Some looked like children. Their mouths opened together. And in my father's voice, they said, "Stay." The lights above the basin went out. Every single one. The canyon fell into darkness. I ran. I don't remember deciding to. One moment I was staring into the crack, and the next, I was sprinting back through the canyon, my flashlight beam whipping wildly across the walls. The names seemed longer than before. Fresh ones appeared where there had been bare stone. And near the entrance, carved at eye level, I saw mine. Caleb Wyatt. The letters were clean, new. Behind me, the whispering rose. Not chasing exactly, calling, begging, laughing, using every voice I had ever loved. By the time I reached my truck, the lights had returned. They weren't above the canyon anymore. They were around me. Dozens of them hung over the abandoned vehicles, glowing softly, like porch lights outside homes that had been waiting a long time. My truck wouldn't start. I turned the key again and again. Nothing. The radio came on. My mother's voice filled the cab. "Caleb, please come inside." I screamed and slammed my fist against the dashboard. The engine turned over. I threw the truck in reverse and backed up so fast I clipped the side of the old pickup. Metal screamed against metal. Then I spun around and drove east, away from the canyon, away from the lights, away from every voice calling my name. I didn't look back until I reached the paved road. When I did, the desert behind me was dark. No lights, no canyon, no vehicles, nothing. The next morning, I went back with my shotgun, 2 full gas cans, and enough fear to keep my hands shaking the entire drive. I found the place where the dirt road should have dipped into the wash. It didn't. The land was flat. The brush was thick. There were no tire tracks except mine. No canyon. No rusted trucks. No crack in the earth. I walked for nearly 3 hours under the sun, trying to find anything that proved what had happened. All I found was a piece of metal half buried in the dirt, a strip from my truck's passenger door, the same side I scraped against the old pickup. That was enough for me. I don't go out after dark anymore. People still come to Marfa to watch the lights. They laugh and take pictures and argue about whether it's headlights or swamp gas or some old trick of the atmosphere. I don't correct them. I don't tell them what I saw, because the truth sounds insane until you're standing alone in the desert, with your dead father's voice coming through the radio. The lights are not a mystery. They are not ghosts. They are not reflections. They are bait. And whatever lives beneath that desert has learned something about us. It learned that people will follow beauty. It learned that people will follow curiosity. But most of all, it learned that people will follow the voices of those they miss. Last week, I drove past the viewing area on my way home from town. There were tourists lined up along the fence, cameras pointed toward the horizon. Kids laughed. Couples leaned against truck beds. Someone cheered when the first light appeared. I kept driving, but before I turned onto my road, I looked in the rearview mirror. Far behind me, one light had separated from the others. It wasn't drifting with them. It was following my truck. I got home and locked every door. That night, I unplugged the radio in the kitchen. I turned off my phone. I shut down every television in the house. For a while, there was only silence. Then, just after midnight, the baby monitor in my mother's old room clicked on. "I don't have a baby," the speaker hissed softly. Then my grandfather's voice whispered through the static. "Boy." A pale orange glow appeared outside my window. Then another. Then another. I didn't look. I sat in the hallway with my shotgun across my lap and waited for sunrise. By morning, they were gone. But carved into the dust on the outside of my bedroom window were 3 words: "We know you." So if you ever go to Marfa and you see the lights moving across the desert, enjoy them from the road. Take your pictures. Tell your friends. Make your theories. But if one light separates from the others, if your radio turns to static, if you hear someone you love calling from somewhere out in the dark, do not follow it, because some places don't need roads to find you, and some lights were never meant to guide people home.